It's the Coast to Coast on InsideCarolina.com. Joey Powell here with the usual suspects. Hey, we're glad you're joining us. If you're one of the folks that are joining us live on YouTube, welcome in, welcome home. And I hope you've recognized that this is your new home, as Inside Carolina has found a new home on 3. Go ahead and sign up. You can get a subscription right now for $1. You can even get a taco now for $1. I remember when Taco Bell, you could get I don't know, you had like $5, you get like 18 tacos. Well, you can't do that anymore, but you can get your subscription to On 3 and all of this big time Inside Carolina premium content for $1, $1. Uno, one, unus. That's all the languages I'm going to do tonight. But I hope you guys will join us. Same great staff, still the same best work in the biz. Same content you've come to get used to. I want you to come on over. So make that happen. Usual suspects here, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. But tonight we're going to be a little bit different. Still going to be brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. Still going to be produced by John Siegley. But look who's back. Back again. Robbie's back. Tell a friend. Rob Harrington has returned to the show. Familiar voice, a sharp set of eyes, but somebody who's been around this program, has been around IC long enough to remember when Inside Carolina recruiting coverage was a pager alert and a message board thread. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the roster rebuild with Rob. Got some big time recruiting visits that are wrapping up now, but also some more on the horizon. And we figured we'd get a little weird tonight. Sherrell McMillan is going to get the propers for this topic, as we're going to talk about what Bill Belichick's arrival in Chapel Hill and what this football program hype might mean for basketball. So all that said, let's get into it. First things first. Rob, I'm going to just throw the grenade out there and let you decide how you want to dive, which direction you want to dive, and if you even want to cover up. But I want to give you kind of the leeway here to talk about your 30,000 foot view of this roster. You know, big turnover, a lot of new stuff. You're going to be back doing a lot more stuff with Inside Carolina, so I hope folks will get comfortable to seeing you again. But we figured this would be a good time to reintroduce you to the folks. And I want you to just tell us what you think about North Carolina's roster rebuild and where things sit as we sit right now at the end of August.
Sure. Well, first of all, excuse me, I'm working my way through a cold. Quite a debut. I want to say thank you for having me. It's a privilege and honor. Also, it's a relief to be carried by gentlemen of this caliber. So it takes all the pressure off as I work off the rust. The roster, as a segue, I don't anticipate there being much rust. I think there are a couple of ways to think about this. One, the team should be good. Now, how we define good in the eye of the beholder, I think good means top 15. And I think that's a team that will enable us not to track metrics and bubble watch like we did all last season. And I hope pretty early in the year we're able to get past that. I think this team should be better than that. Another way to think about it is we'll get clarity on the head coach. That's an undeniable backdrop to the season. And I don't think there are any more false starts. I think we'll know. I mean, obviously there are certain outcomes that could produce more ambiguity, but I think this roster will tell us what Hubert Davis can do. The other thing, and I think this will dovetail into our discussion from football, is this roster evinces the fact that Carolina has gotten serious about not only NIL, but I think in general they have modernized the way they think about Carolina athletics as part of the university. And this is going to show up repeatedly in the coming years. Conference realignment, new gym, all of those things speak to this fact. But I think the Lee Roberts administration, has imparted something new that those of us, as you said, have been around a while since the pager days, didn't think we'd see. So I'm really excited about this team. And I'm also excited about these broader, more global Carolina changes and where that might take us.
Yeah, I think the comment about Lee Roberts is a good one. And I will point everybody to the official UNC podcast from the school. Had a great interview with Lee Roberts. And shout out to Adam and Jones. I know Adam might not be crazy about us mentioning this here podcast, but it was a great interview with Chancellor Lee Roberts. And he talked about some of the things that Rob just laid out about the commitment to athletics and how athletics is really a driver and a revenue driver in a place where if the school wants to do more and wants to be more and wants to have a bigger presence and a bigger enrollment, then I think the time that folks look at athletics as a way to get there is now. And it's like Rob said, it's really intriguing to hear the man sitting in South Building saying those things. But I'd point you guys to that interview if you want to. Rob, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think most of the folks listening to this, whether they're listening to us live or watching us later on, um, that yeah, there's absolutely some validity to North Carolina making that commitment, and hopefully fans not having to do the bubble watch and the metric watch and the to explaining to themselves what they think. One of the big parts of this roster returning and the stability is going to be Seth Trimble. Sean and Sherrell have done a great job in talking about what they view as Trimble's new role. But I'm going to throw this question out there for all three of you. Rob, I'll let you start, then I'll kick to you two other fellas. How do you view Seth Trimble as being the guy, right? Because that's different than what he's been in the past. He has never been a straight up alpha on a team. And this year, North Carolina is going to require him to be an alpha. So, Rob, I'll ask you, how do you feel like an alpha Seth Trimble would look to North Carolina fans? Because it's going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a huge leap. Part of the reason I favored him playing more than Ian Jackson last year, especially toward the end of the year, was for this exact reason that he was an emotional leader. He always brought the competitive drive, even when he wasn't playing as well at times. Obviously, his jump shot really trailed off at the end of last year, but he gives them a lot of these little plays, these little competitive advantages that they were missing most of the season. And I think that he will expand on those things. Being an alpha and a leader does not necessarily require him to take a ton of shots. I would like to see him become more involved in the offense consistently, but he doesn't have to be a finisher. I think they'll have plenty of offense around him. If he doesn't shoot well, again, that's going to put more pressure on the other guys, and that's a trade-off they'll have to accept. Ideally, he'll have one of these classic Carolina senior years like Okalaja or Bucknall or Ramsey Smith taking it back a ways, where they just all of a sudden made this huge jump. And I still, even in today's era, I think that type of thing is possible, especially when he enters the year. Unlike last year, there's no Ian Jackson. I mean, Seth has a very clear runway to a huge role. So I'm expecting him to have a great season, statistically or not. I think he'll be critically important.
Sean, I'm going to ask you the same thing. And it doesn't have to be, what does an alpha Seth Trimble look like? But do you think Seth Trimble can be a player where, like Rob was saying, he is an alpha without scoring 20 to 25 a game? I know North Carolina would love that from him to have that sort of point production, but what do you think that looks like, Sean?
Well, I think if he were to have that type of point production, maybe everything Rob said in the beginning, might be a challenge. But I think from a pure alpha perspective, in my mind, I see that really from a leadership perspective. I think you did see that on the court in terms of how he carried himself in terms of some of the huddles. And I think that was always an issue with the team last year of where is some of that emotional leadership coming through. I think with all the transfers and freshmen and Eastern Europeans coming to the squad, that his presence of being here now 4 years is really important just in terms of how things are done. The jump he did make last year from his sophomore year to junior year, from points, rebounds, efficiency staying the same, maybe tweaking up a little bit. Obviously, the 3-point shooting at a much higher volume went down significantly, and is something we've talked about. But as the alpha, I would want to see that at least from a points per game stay or maybe slightly increase, because I don't think at the end of the day he is the guy that you need to be the Memphis Seth that everybody brings up, or getting 15 continuously, just given some of the skill sets around him. But he can't be the guy that we saw in Ole Miss and many other games where he was non-existent for a half. And then, he came on at the end, guns blazing, but his consistency has to be there throughout. And I think offensively that will stop a lot of the offensive lulls that we did see last year. And then defensively is going to be really important because he will be tasked with guarding that lead guard or that top guard. And we talked about it a lot last year, right? How he started the Florida half was how we hoped we could see him play in a lot of other situations, which sometimes, we really didn't after that. So in my mind, the alpha really goes to leadership, how he is on the defensive end. I think maintaining with a slight improvement offensively. And then I do want to see him passing a lot better on the fast break.
Speaking of passing here on the Coast to Coast, what we do, we like to keep the ball moving. So I'm going to pass it back to Rob, since you haven't been with us in a while. So you talked about Trimble, kind of runway this year, clear runway last year with a whole bunch of people in the way. Which one do you think is better for a player, entering the season, like a clear runway or like a lots of competition that they're going to have to face?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think skill-wise, sometimes iron sharpens iron. In Trimble's case, I think there was so much ambiguity around his role last year because it wasn't just the Memphis Trimble, it was also the Maui Trimble. And you saw him sort of stepping into a bigger leadership role. But eventually what happened with that surplus of guards put downward pressure on him. And he, pick your word, he either accepted or succumbed to a more minor role as an offensive player. Sean's saying they can't afford for him to have a half where he disappears. That's part of being a leader. But I think knowing that it is his team, the minutes have to be there for someone in that position. It can't be a by committee sort of thing. So I think in his case, it will benefit him by having total clarity, like, hey, we're going to give you the keys, what the expectations are around that in terms of stats. I don't know. I'd be interested. I'd love to hear the conversations they've had with him this summer and going into the fall. What do we expect from you offensively? Can he get back to his defensive level as a sophomore? That's another question. I thought he fell off a little bit last year. All of those things remain to be answered, but I think the fact that he knows that he needs to be this guy, it needs to be his team, will help him.
And yeah, just to be clear, it's not us saying that Seth Trimble, like, this is his team, he's going to be the guy. It's just stuff we've heard from multiple people, like, off the record. And then you look at some of the material that's come out, or the limited amount of material that's come out about this roster, and Seth Trimble is front and center. So, like, we're not just assuming that this is going to happen. This is kind of what UNC is telling us is going to happen. So just wanted to make that clear. And there's no doubt when they have media days in Charlotte, ACC, that Seth Trimble will be one of the players going down there.
Yeah, he's going to be front and center, and you're exactly right on that, Shirley. I think, even if it were not that he was one of the few returning players, and if he were not a fourth-year player in the program, which, doesn't happen in college very much anymore, I still think North Carolina would look to him because of his personality and because of the style of the other players, that he would probably need to be that alpha. Sherelle, do you agree with that?
Yeah, to some degree. And again, I really liked what Rob said. Alpha does not equal points. You can be an alpha without shooting 27 times. And I think often we have conflated those two. So I think he can do it from UNC, especially if his defense kind of takes another uptick. You know how I feel about Seth. I think he is really kind of the X factor, whatever phrase you want to use for a person who's very important to whatever happens with the team. And I think if he can have that uptick defensively, he can be just a little bit better on the open floor when it comes to finishing and passing. Then yeah, I mean, he can be an alpha. Now, do you need an alpha all the time? Like, do you have to have that? That's another discussion for another day. But I think he can be someone who at least the folks who haven't been in Chapel Hill can look towards and say, hey, man, what should we be doing now? Or, hey, let's get it together. He can be kind of the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak.
So I'm curious, and maybe this isn't on the alpha subject, but Sherrell, Rob, or Joey, going back to the springtime, RJ was obviously done. Elliot Cadeau was transferring pretty quickly, and then it seemed with Trimble, was he going? Was he staying? It seemed like it could have gone either way, and then he did stay. Almost, it seemed, as we're talking about UNC turning the keys over to him from that guard position before they started to add everybody else. I would have to imagine as part of that conversation, it went along the lines that he is going to have the ball in his hand more than he has. I don't think that means a pass first point guard or dribbling the ball up the court all the time, but I would imagine he does have the ball in his hands a little bit more, pick and roll situations. I think going back to that San Diego State game where the game was a blowout and you did get to see him in minutes, as that lead ball handler. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts on if we will see that more often and how we think that could look. I think during his time at Carolina, his turnover percentage has gone down every year, but so has his assist percentage. So I think it'll be interesting to see, can he not have that role, but can he shoulder some of that responsibility? And maybe I'll go to Sherrell first.
I was like, are you going to call on somebody or are we just going to go? Yeah, I think he can handle some. But I think if you fully put the ball in his hands full time, I don't think that's necessarily a recipe that's best for his personal success or best for the team's success. Now, he has played point guard, in high school, so he has played it some, but you don't have to be like if you're going to be kind of someone who plays in the role. I don't want to throw 80 kind of minutes out there, but let's just say 8 minutes a game or 9 minutes a game. You don't necessarily have to be dynamic for that role. You just have to be sturdy and solid, whatever adjective you want to use that implies not messing up. So I think he can definitely do that. Now I think the issue is going to be if, Kyle Evans or Derek Dixon aren't able to be that primary facilitator and he has to take over some of that and then he's having to do it 30, 40, 50% of the possessions, then I think that can become an issue. But in some time, I think he'll be fine. I don't really see a huge issue with that. But it almost, though, you're almost like you're kind of taking from your savings account, so to speak, because he can do so many other things on the wing, as far as defense, as far as getting past his man, getting into the lane. He's turned himself into an excellent free throw shooter. So like you have to be careful and like not giving him too much of that role because you're taking from some of the things that he does really well. But I think in spot minutes and in brief minutes, yeah, I think he'll be fine. I don't see a huge issue.
I would add to that. I think Sherrell hit on the point for me. Is he playing more minutes at point guard because he's the 1998 Shammond Williams who's just improved so much? Or is it defaulting to him because Evans and Dixon can't handle it? And if that happens, that's a serious problem. I also would go back to the comment about his defense. I think Trimble would have to be a max effort point guard. Some people can just sort of effortlessly handle the ball and get you into your stuff. I think Trimble would really have to focus on it. So he probably would give something, certainly in those minutes, he would have to give something defensively. So I think from his development point of view, change of pace, cool. I'm happy for him to be on the ball some, but if he's doing it for 15 minutes per game, I really would hope it's a result of his improvement rather than some of the other guys just aren't handling it.
And to your point, Rob, if he does have to do that, think about maybe the strengths of the other players who'd be on the court with him. Luka Bogovats, his individual defense, I think, is something that we're going to need to see, especially against ACC caliber players. Kyle Evans, same thing. We're going to need to see it against ACC caliber players. So if you take Trimble and make him a full effort, point guard, and his defense flags off, then you don't really have someone who you can say, go stop 55 or go stop 14, because that's what Trimble would do. Unless there's someone that's going to develop that we don't know about or we're not expecting. But looking at their backcourt, he's kind of the defensive stopper. So again, like I said, it's like borrowing from your savings, and sometimes that's not necessarily the best play. So I think a few minutes a game is fine. Doesn't have to be dynamic, just has to be solid. I really hesitate making this comparison, and I don't mean one for one. But if you think about the times that Leaky Black kind of played point guard, not as like the guy, not as the second guy, kind of just as an emergency or just somebody to be steady. I think if Trimble can do that, just be steady, just be solid, not a lot of turnovers, doesn't have to have a high assist rate, just get the ball across the court and let the offense kind of move from there. I think that would be a good role. Now, a question that comes off of that is, will the offense be the kind of offense where he can get the ball across the court and, the offense starts from whatever. Because what we saw last year, it wasn't that kind of offense. It was very much a give the ball to the guard and let the guard do something. So there's a lot of questions that come with Seth, having some kind of lead guard role, and some of them are good, some of them aren't.
I think all of what you guys are kind of contributing are fair assessments of what Seth may be. And I think those are probably representative of what most of our listeners are considering. I would also say, and Rob was kind of touching on this a little bit, but I do think there is a certain amount of gas in a player's tank. And whether he's expending that over the course of a game on the offensive end or the defensive end, I don't think you can expect Seth Trimble to be a good or really good point guard and his defense not slip a little bit just because of the amount of energy that it takes to be a good impact athlete on a top level team. I think that might have been where Rob was trying to go, but that's at least my takeaway from it. Fellas, let's move on from the Seth Trimble portion of the show, because there's going to be a lot of times where we're going to talk about him, I think, over the next 5-6 months. But we had some players stop by, or at least players stop by Chapel Hill recently, and Anthony Thompson. Sherrell, give us a little bit about the young man and what his visit looked like, as you can imagine it.
Well, Joey, I'm going to ask you, how do you think the visit went?
I think everybody enjoyed themselves. I think the coaching staff was happy with the way it went. He seems to really enjoy himself when he was taking photos wearing Jordans and posing with basketballs. His family really liked the staff. Stop me when you've heard this before.
Did they visit the business school? I think that's the big question here.
That's the other one. Yeah. Did they go to the business school? Yeah.
So yeah, I say that tongue in cheek because the visits always go well. I've told the story a million times. I think Bryce Johnson might be the only time that someone was like, yeah, I wasn't really feeling it. And then he commits and becomes an All-American. So you never know how this stuff is going to go. But yeah, the early word is that it did go well. I think official visits now for a lot of guys, because they're taking so many. I think Thompson has 4 or 5 more. And then there's other guys who have 7 or 8 more, 9 or 10 more. They're not doing the full 48 hours anymore. That's rare. So if it's almost a tell. Like if someone does a full 48 hours, I think they're really kind of feeling that school. What we've seen really since the portal became a thing is a lot of 24 to 36 hour visits, and that's what Thompson's was. He got to Chapel Hill Friday early afternoon and left Saturday night. And kind of did all the things that you would do during an official visit, meet with academic staff, talk to the coaches, talk to the coaches about how, what they envision him being, how he would look in the offense, take your pictures, get some shots up in the Smith Center, talk to some current players. Hopefully might have a note on Caleb Wilson and him, that we can put on the premium board in a couple of days. But, obviously met with Caleb Wilson, hung out with the team, toured the facilities, all that good stuff. And I'm sure there was meetings with, I don't know this for sure, but I'm sure there were meetings with Jim Tanner and his staff, and all the things that you have to negotiate now and talk about now in official visits that you didn't have to 5 years ago. So he left Saturday night, and he's got a few more visits left, and then we'll kind of see what happens. But it's a first start for UNC. We've always said if they can get guys on campus, then they have a shot. And even in this day and age, they got him on campus, which, talking to some people nationally, they were pretty surprised that he actually decided to use an official visit on Carolina, or take an official visit to Carolina. So that's where that stands. And then, they'll keep having guys in for the next month, basically every weekend.
Yeah, a question just for you, Sherrell, on this topic. When the agents meet with the schools, do the players typically sit in on those meetings, or is that a sidebar?
I don't know that. I have an idea, but I don't want to say without being 100% sure. I know not a lot. Some of those conversations definitely happen beforehand. So they're, I guess you would call it, in advanced negotiations by the time an official visit happens. Whereas it used to be, even 2 years ago with Carolina, where they really didn't talk about numbers or anything until the player got on campus. So just in that respect, that's a sign of growth, I would say, over the last 2 years, and that it's become much more sophisticated, much more professional, and that contracts and stuff are discussed on official visits and discussed beforehand, so they're like I said, more advanced than they were 2 years ago. So I will find the answer to that question, but I know, I know that his representation was on campus this past weekend, so it would stand to reason that if his representation is there, then they, would have a meeting with UNC. But I can't confirm that they did.
It used to be the tale, Sherrell, is that if a player came without his parents or caregivers or whomever he lived with, that he wasn't really interested in committing. And now I think maybe you can start applying that to representation. But for folks that aren't familiar, Anthony Thompson, he's 6'8". He's from Hudson, Ohio, Western Reserve Academy. He's the first member of the 26 class to show up to UNC, and he's a number 6 overall prospect per the Rivals rankings. Sherrell, 2 more guys that are coming in that we know of before we do the show again in 2 weeks. Do you want to go ahead and flash those out to all the peeps?
Yeah, Tony Bryant, 6'10" forward from Florida, is scheduled to come in on Sunday. And then Ron Rippey, who is kind of right now the only lead guard who they seem to have any traction with in the class, from New Jersey, is coming in on Monday. They both will be at the TCU game. So that's kind of a big environment. It's going to be kind of a circus in Chapel Hill. So they'll both be in town for that. But Rippey wanted to stay through Tuesday. So that's why he's waiting to come on Monday. And Bryant will probably leave, I assume, I don't know this for sure, leave Tuesday morning, whereas Rippey will leave more towards Tuesday evening.
And again, for folks who are following this stuff pretty heavily, you might want to note that, these are 3 of the top prospects in the 26 class, all play different positions. So something to think about. And it gives you a pretty good idea of where, we like to talk about how the coaching staff will make a priority list of who they're going to chase and who they're going to go after and who they really want to put pressure on to come to North Carolina. I think this is going to start giving you some of those inklings. Sure, I think something that's really important for folks is did Anthony Thompson go to Johnny T-shirt while he was here?
I have reached out and asked. I haven't got a response yet, but if he didn't, then kind of, shame on him.
Well, I mean, we all know that's the the proverbial wind that will knock the deck down and will allow North Carolina to start reaping benefits. Which, if Mr. Thompson, his representation went to Johnny T-shirt, they would also be reaping said benefits. Johnny T-shirt is a longtime supporter of Inside Carolina. They're still with us. They came to On 3 too, because they know that this partnership is amazing. You can become a subscriber to Inside Carolina. Go to the premium message boards, use the code there at the top, and you can get an extra 10% off of your order at Johnny T-shirt. You've got just a few more days to get that new gear before the football opener. I've been trying to tell y'all. I tried to told you multiple times to get this done. Well, we're in the short rows now, and y'all need to go ahead and make that call, make that visit, make that web transaction with johnnytshirt.com. They will take care of you. You'll be looking fresh for the first game. Again, I told Sherrell, if he pulls up and is wearing some old rags for the first game, I'm going to clown him audibly in front of family. So don't be in that situation. Get you something from Johnny T-shirt for that first football game. You'll be glad you did. Keenan's going to be rocking. You don't want to come in here looking lame in a very, very soft fit. We're going to take a quick break and let some of the national guys, if you were listening to us on audio form, there will be some national ads that'll run here for a second. If you're with us on the YouTubes, just hang. We're going to keep talking about more and more stuff. All right, so here is kind of the back half of the show. I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina on 3. We've got Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran, the usual Coast to Coast crew, with us, but also Rob Harrington has emerged from his fortress of awesomeness and will start joining us more regularly here on Inside Carolina. So he figured he would get in here tonight. And one of the things that we want to talk about, Sherrell and I were messaging earlier, this is all his idea, and I love the potential topic, and I thought we'd start here. North Carolina has gone really, really all in on football with the hire of Bill Belichick. Not only is it a splash hire from, I guess, a Q rating perspective, but they've invested a significant amount of money in not only Belichick, but the staff that he's bringing in, and now the roster that they're constructing under him. And I think there might be a couple of different schools of thought around this. There are some basketball traditionalists that don't care about anything else around North Carolina athletics other than basketball, because that's what they know and that's what they like. And that's okay. I'm not here to cast aspersions on that. But there are also folks that understand that this could also be a good thing for North Carolina basketball, that if Bill Belichick and the football program can become a cash cow, a team that is drawing big ratings on television and becomes, relevant nationally on a regular basis, that this could also be a boon to basketball. So, Sean, I'm going to come to you first. Gut reaction about Bill Belichick coming to Chapel Hill. Not necessarily do you think it's going to work, but how do you think this potential fit with football could affect basketball in this new age of kind of revenue driving everything in college sports?
Great. It's a great question. One you could probably go down a lot of different paths. I for one, little nervous of how all the buzz, if it can stay after Monday night, or if it falls off pretty hard, given how some of the position rankings have looked. But don't need to go into. We can save that for the football podcast. I think the main thing is with football driving the revenue, especially the revenue disparities that we're starting to see between the SEC and Big Ten and everybody else, that with UNC committing to spend, at least for right now, in football, it means that, in my mind, they have to keep that up from a basketball perspective. And I think we did see that for the most part this spring with NIL. I don't think it was at a Kentucky level where they're just throwing out crazy money to and getting everybody that they want. And you see the articles talking about 20 million, but you do see UNC in that second tier and kind of trouncing a lot of other ACC or even SEC or Big Ten schools. And I think with the brand name that UNC has built has been on basketball. And I think as a big brand in basketball, you need to be able to spend that money. And I think the main thing is, if they are spending in football, and football, that enthusiasm, can continue to generate, whether that is them staying in the national limelight from a football perspective, and that rises the basketball tide, I think makes sense. I don't think we'll see a situation where the football is taking money from basketball, because I think everybody knows what UNC is first and foremost. But at the very least, it has had UNC in the news for the most part a positive light, other than basketball. But at the same time, with all the focus on football, if basketball gets off to a slow start, is this another long season in terms of the news that is created from that situation? But in the long run, I think it will be healthy, and it does show that long-term commitment to basketball now that it is more than a brand, and money has to be put behind that brand name.
Sherrell, I want to ask you, you've seen a lot of different ways that North Carolina has tried to use football in that environment. And they're, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, they're going to do it with the two recruits for the opener against TCU. How do you think that will fit as, I don't want to say as football continues to rise in popularity, but if football continues to rise in popularity, and as Sean said, if they're able to have some early season success and are able to find something with this hire and this commitment, what does basketball recruiting look like in that kind of symbiotic relationship with football games?
Oh, I mean, it can't hurt. Like, no, Rob Harrington, 5-star player, is not gonna pick Texas because he went to the Texas Alabama game and it was amazing. Like, let's just be clear, he's not gonna pick it. But if Texas and Alabama are offering the same amount of money, and Texas and Alabama have similar, roster construction, and Texas and Alabama have really good coaches, then yeah, maybe fan enthusiasm and the buzz around campus and all that stuff could be a decider. You never know with these guys. So you want to have as many things in your favor as possible. If you have the money, great. You got the coach, great. You got the other players who he wants to play with, great. Do you have the venue? Great. Do you have the fan enthusiasm? Do you have a good football team? Are you on television all the time? That could be something that pushes over the top. And I think, Joey, we've all been around for a long time. UNC football being on ESPN every day for essentially 7.5 months is one of the more bizarre things to happen in my lifetime. And that is millions and millions of dollars of free advertising. And there's no way that can hurt the basketball program. So the more Bill Belichick is on ESPN, it might not be a direct one-to-one relationship, but that helps the basketball program because they're seeing Carolina. even just in the subconscious. It's like they're seeing the interlocking NC over and over. They're hearing Michael Lombardi talk. They're seeing Bill Belichick be interviewed. They're seeing everybody talk about how amazing this is and how TCU is going to be, how the atmosphere is going to be. That stuff helps. Now, you got to sustain it, after all the hype is gone. But there's no way it hurts UNC or the basketball program. And then, this is always, all this in the end comes down to money. And the better the football program is, the more money it's going to bring in, and that helps everybody. So there's not really a negative, I think, for the basketball program, if they're being honest. Now, I could see how maybe not being seen as the top dog on campus might hurt some folks' feelings, but if everybody just takes a step back and kind of removes the ego from it, there's no way this is bad for Carolina basketball. It's a really good thing to happen to Carolina basketball, I would say.
Rob, I think a lot of folks think, and we've talked about this on Inside Carolina Live, which, by the way, will be coming to you from the Bowls lot before the TCU game, beginning at 5 p.m. So if you're down in the Bowls lot, come say what's up to Tommy and I. But Rob, one of the things we've talked about before about football is that when Alabama started winning these national championships and Saban kind of reached his peak, and it got to a point where they were just walking through every season, sometimes undefeated, sometimes losing one game, but just literally printing money, that they got to a place where they were reinvesting back into the university and back into athletics. And now all of a sudden, Nate Oates and Alabama basketball are a perennial top 15, top 10 team. If nothing else, they've become incredibly formidable and a thorn in the side of North Carolina. Rob, I want to ask you, do you feel like that is the type of thing that maybe North Carolina can aspire for? I mean, I'm not saying that North Carolina should aspire to be Alabama, but could that relationship where all of a sudden now Alabama has the NIL funding, and Alabama has all this other stuff where they've got this massive staff, and a lot of it is due to football money. Do you feel like that might be a good model to look after, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, if they could get there for sure. I think I'm more optimistic on the fan support side in terms of a symbiosis. Because I do think if the fans see the football program have success out of nowhere, being on TV all the time, then you feel like, hey, my $100 meant something. It's helping us get over the top. Now these contributions are not just getting thrown into the abyss. We're getting better. And so that could encourage someone to donate to basketball as well, to the extent they're not already just doing general giving. I think that's where it could really show up. The SEC example is a little different for me because of all the TV money they get. All of the SEC has leveled up. Carolina's having a hard time against anyone in the SEC these days. But there's no question that I think Alabama's reputation for football excellence sort of spread to the overall athletic department. I mean, likewise, we don't even have to look at Alabama. I don't think it hurt the basketball program in the late 90s when Matt Brown had those 2 really good years. And it started to look like this is a powerhouse athletic department. And obviously, this is very long before pre-NIL. But I do think there is something to it. On the other hand, I'm not sure that Colorado's basketball program has necessarily gotten a huge lift from Deion. As much excitement as he's generated on the football side, that's a moribund program as opposed to Carolina football, which we might agree is dormant rather than moribund, depending on how many seasons you've suffered through, I guess. But I do think there's something to it. I mean, I definitely think Alabama is a good model. It's a Southern school. It's a good school with good graduate schools. Carolina's got a little bit of an edge there academically, to the extent that it matters. But I do think that there could be a tie-in, especially from the fan side. As Sherrell already said, if you're a recruit and you love the visit, you love Belichick, it's fun. But then Carolina's $1 million short on NIL, probably not going to swing you. But I think from a resources perspective, all that stuff builds. And so I'm excited about seeing whether it does or not. And I think Alabama is a good place to look.
Want to give some love to all the 200 folks that are watching us live tonight. But something I'm hearing from all of you guys is that this is, unequivocally a positive if football can have this level of Q rating and success that they've at least gotten preseason with all the hype. Can the success match the hype? Can all the field performance match it? But yeah, if football does well, everybody eats. Sherrell?
And to the point Rob was making earlier about the chancellor, what he's shown is that, like, hey, they're going to invest in athletics. They're going to invest, especially in these revenue sports that help keep everything churning. And if I'm the basketball program, yeah, it might be a little off-putting at first that Carolina football signs a coach for $10 million a year and they're given all these resources. But if you step back and look at it from the perspective of the overall athletic department, you say, okay, that's good, because if they show and they do well with the kind of commitment they've made there, then they're going to come to us, because we still are Carolina basketball. We still mean a lot to so many people. And we're one of the, I don't say few, but there aren't a ton of college basketball programs who are in the black. Most of them are in the red. So the fact that they have one that's in the black, that helps a ton. So I think, it's going to be a good thing for UNC. It might take a couple of years for it to kind of fully vest. But again, I just don't see really the negative in it, because it's going to help. And, that's never a bad thing when you have a Hall of Fame coach they're pouring resources into. Eventually, they're going to pour resources into you. The chancellor's already said they want to pour resources into you. They understand that UNC kind of is the crown jewel, or one of the crown jewels in all of college basketball, and they're going to treat it as such. And to Rob's point again earlier, there was a little bit too much from the administration, I think, over the past, let's say, 30 years of just kind of, we're Carolina, we're going to go get it done because we're Carolina. And now they're putting money behind the we're Carolina, and that's a powerful combo.
I think what's actually shocking is that, the North Carolina brand is still the North Carolina brand. Like, I'm not trying to go full Marlo Stanfield here, but, the name is still the name. And in spite of, like you said, Sherrell, with having North Carolina invest into football, that helps the athletic department, but it also take a step further back. It helps the entire campus. It helps the entire university community. And that's the thing I think that may have been in the way for the last little while, where everybody, North Carolina wanted to be, Harvard Monday through Friday, and then wanted to be Alabama on Saturday. And did pretty well at the first part, but struggled with the latter. Rob, you want to throw something out to the three of us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is let's call it a miniature elephant in the room, which is why we're talking about all these revenues for the football and men's basketball, and obviously the drivers. Can you scale the way that Carolina is talking about scaling and still support all of these non-revenue sports? Because Alabama's not doing that. The SEC is much more streamlined with their sports. That's part of the reason why some people prefer the Big Ten, because they have a more balanced roster of sports. Can Carolina still be field hockey? Can they still do volleyball? Can they still support all these other programs and still have the money to get ahead in football and men's basketball? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's something they're going to have to come to terms with one way or the other.
I think the aim on the heels of the House settlement is to start that way and hope that they can continue to maintain. And I will say, from trying to keep up with everything that the Rams Club has done, in addition to what North Carolina has done with NIL funding and how they intend on funding these things, I think there is a good amount of energy and belief behind the fact that they should be able to continue to maintain all of those sports. And then again, as we said a few minutes ago, if football can continue or is able to maintain the level of hype that they've gotten preseason, and if somehow they can find some success in year one and turn that into a 2 or maybe a 3, then I think that makes that a lot easier of a conversation. But you also have to consider the fact that North Carolina is bringing a new athletic director in. The new athletic director is somebody who's very concerned and has learned through his multiple levels of career experience in fundraising around sports, or finding investment for sports in the professional model. So there's that, and then I think there's also going to be some opportunity with some of the hires they've made. They've created a revenue officer position within the athletic department now. So, in addition to what we've said about the chancellor and what we've talked about with the investment in football, there's a lot of other infrastructure being put into place to help not only maintain the level of success that North Carolina has had amongst all of the sports that they currently fund, but I think some aspirations of even increasing that level of success, and hopefully, getting some other sports in there in the national championship conversation. I'll shut up and let somebody else jump in if they want to.
I was just going to say, Greg Barnes is at home just wondering why he's not, on this podcast right now. He's just
Only because I don't have a screen that can hold 5 heads. Sean, you've got this West Coast economics mind. Let us hear it.
I think it is a question, but I do think for the SEC, you have seen a lot of schools that have not gotten the love in the past or had that success. I think you've started to see that. It's probably driven a little bit by Texas's success, boosting the SEC. But it is going to be a challenge no matter what dollars are behind the SEC or Big Ten. You look at the Big Ten and how bad baseball is in that conference, but you do look at a lot of the other Olympic sports. But I do think you have seen general increased success from SEC schools across the board in some of the other sports that Carolina has been winning championships and been winning in. So once again, there is still, even though UNC is spending, like a SEC school in the major sports, there still is that big gap from the TV money right now. But I do think in general, the money being spent for football, we saw it in basketball, I think this spring where they had a lot of holes to fill, and there could have been situations where Drake came back and they would have found the money for Drake. He didn't come back, but all of a sudden they're looking at Luka Bogovac from Montenegro, and they found the money for that. So I do think the pressure almost in terms of the financial resources they were giving to football provided them the ability to dig deeper. And Sherrell probably has a better idea of what their budget was coming into NIL. And granted, I think everybody blew out their budget, but they were able to do it to fill, once again, Rob said top 15, and maybe from a pure NBA like superstar one and done type players, they don't have that, but they were able to fill in for the most part all the holes outside of maybe some elite athleticism. And I think that was digging deeper into their pockets. But back to Rob's initial question, I do think it will be pressure tested. A lot of these sports will be pressure tested with what NIL funds are able to come down their way. But I do think with the success, you don't want to lose what has made Carolina great for all these years, and that's basketball and the Olympic sports, and now trying to add a consistent football team going forward.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. I think, when you're thinking about investment, you're thinking about how much money is being put behind these things. We haven't even touched on, we talked a little bit about infrastructure. We haven't touched on any of the, capital expansion or growth or rebuilding of buildings that's probably going to take place, because everybody thinks, man, these buildings cost a lot of money. Well, the other way to look at building buildings, and North Carolina basketball is going to have a conversation about this in the near future, that they're actually having now, but will become more public in the near future. When you have these new facilities and these new buildings, they're going to come with naming rights. So not only are you're going to be on the hook for spending the money to build these things, you'll have a chance to recoup some of that, because somebody's going to want to come in and slap the, gas station pizza name on it, or whatever you want to call it. There will be some folks that want to sponsor these. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think it's been fun discussing this tonight, and I appreciate Sherrell for the suggestion for the topic. But Rob, hopefully we haven't scared you off, man. Do you feel like you can come back for one or more of these in the future?
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys so much for letting me be an interloper for an evening.
We'll send you a bill. I'm not going to straight up call you an interloper. Like, it's just, you're paying to play tonight, buddy. But we're glad that you're here. All right. Sean has sent me in the chat. He has sent me a question from our friend Melinda. So he feels like it's a good question. So I'll ask it before we get out of here. Melinda's a loyal listener too, so I'll make sure we touch base on this, but only because Sean said so. Melinda asked, does the panel think that this team, meaning UNC basketball, is missing any important ingredients, not agreements? Maybe they're missing agreements too. I don't know, but ingredients is what she asked about. Sean, since you're the one that's grabbing the navigational wheel here and steering things, I'm going to ask you, answer it first.
Well, I'm probably most curious about Rob's, just because I think we've probably talked, so much over the spring and summer. I guess it goes to the last point on some of that elite athleticism. I think they've added a lot of, shooting. I think there's a lot of positional flexibility, which is important from a size and just, I think there's a lot of coverage on how the lineups can look. But I do think from that, whether it's offensively, that guy that can go and, at the end of the game, and maybe this is a better thing where you don't have the go-to guy. But at the same time, even last year, Elliot Cadeau proved, hey, with my first step, I can beat a guy off a dribble and make a big shot at certain times. So who is that guy that can create from an athletic perspective? And then, defensively at the same time, we talked about Seth Trimble defensively. We talked a lot about Jonathan Powell, Luka Bogovac offensively, but maybe not as much defensively. I think Caleb Wilson can bring that in the front court, but to me, that would be the one thing they're missing. But I do think that they have covered themselves, whether it's injuries, foul trouble, slumps, that there should be a lot of different lineups and positional flexibility they can use with what they've added this spring.
All right, Rob, same question.
I agree with Sean. I think they are missing a spontaneous playmaker, not just for others, but for himself. How much that hurts them, I think, will depend in large part on what offense they run. If they spam high ball screens like they did last year and have people more stationary in their structured plays, I think it could hurt a lot. If they go to more of a free-flowing player movement passing offense, I don't think it would hurt all that much at all. I mean, it's always better to have a playmaker than not, but it doesn't have to be a fatal flaw. So here's where you cue the intriguing Game of Thrones type music going into the next episode. And we don't know that yet, but I'll be real interested in these first few games, even against the easier competition, to see what is the structure. And it sounds like, at least what little bit of information comes out publicly, that they may be having some changes in the works. And I definitely hope so, because I think that's how they could mitigate some of what they're missing.
All right, Sherrell, your stab at it.
I think Rob, he said it so well. It was like advanced offensive something. What can you remind me what you said, Rob?
He said symbiosis earlier.
I can't remember the exact phrase, but what I would say is they need a do him guy. And what that is that's an AAU with 3 seconds left on the shot clock. The coach usually doesn't have anything drawn up, and he says, hey, number 15, do him, which is just like go to the rim, get a basket, do whatever needs to be done to score. The irony is that they kind of had the ultimate do him guy, or two of the ultimate do him guys on the team last year. One ran out of eligibility, the other is going to be at St. John's next year. So I think that is probably the one thing that's missing from the team. Again, I kind of agree with you that if it is a different offense, and maybe they can mitigate that a little bit better, through movement, free flowing offense. But that's one thing that I think could have been added. And the other thing as far as ingredients, I do worry about I don't know how physical they're going to be. Like Caleb Wilson is coming in as a very talented freshman who we'll talk more about, but like I said, the reviews on him have just been pretty glowing. But can he play, physical ACC basketball for 20 games? Can Henry Vasar play physical ACC basketball for 20 games? You would think so, but at Arizona, he kind of did it for half of a season. Can he do it for a full season and stay out of foul trouble? So I think, a do him guy and physicality are the things that I think maybe could be missing from the team, or they can come out and be super physical and it's not a problem at all. But those two things kind of, as we enter the season are worrisome, I would say.
We're gonna have to workshop the use of do him guy in some way, shape, or form. I don't know that's gonna. I don't know how when this gets transcribed later on how that's gonna flow. But either way, I wasn't gonna stop you. We're on a roll, guys. I appreciate it. Appreciate you making time tonight. Rob, it's good to see you again, dude. Look forward to working with you more often. And like we said, there are going to be a few more regular basketball preview shows coming up in the coming weeks as we get you ready. We're still going to do this show every other week until the season starts, but we've got some other content coming for you because we're in South Carolina and that's how we get down. But we'll have some more stuff coming for you as we get ready for the exhibition, whatever you want to call it. Not a real game with BYU in October. So stay tuned for that. But want to give a special thank you to John Sigley for producing, to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring the show, even if I can't say it properly right now. Running on fumes, boys. You guys took it out of me tonight. But Sean, Sherrell, thank y'all so much for being here as always. Thanks to the over 200 folks that joined us live on Inside Carolina's YouTube channel. And to Rob, we'll see you again more often, more frequently, and we're going to hold you to the same standard you brought tonight, man. So don't come in here with a limp or any sort of excuses about your performance. But we'll talk to you all very, very soon. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode of the Coast to Coast here on InsideCarolina.com. Say hi to your mother for me.